topic. So workplace violence and prevention of workplace violence. So what we want to do today is talk a little bit about what is the problem, what's the scope of the problem, what is workplace violence. Lots of times we actually have employees out there that don't really know, that some behaviors they're doing actually could be considered workplace violence. And so we want to make sure that we identify what behaviors would be considered workplace violence so we can help train our employees to avoid those things. And then also, what are some warning signs of folks who may become violent in the workplace? How do we diffuse those situations or prevent them from happening? How do we protect ourselves and others in these situations? And what are some other things that we can do when facing a threat? So let's talk a little bit about the scope of the problem. We have about 2 million reports annually in the United States of violence in the workplace. We have about a little over a half a million non-fatal violent crimes that happen in the workplace. So about 2 million reports, but actual, about 572,000 crimes happening that are non-fatal. 11% of fatal occupational injuries are homicides. And so when we actually look at people who do die at work on the job, about 11% of those are from a murder. 29% of females who are victims of a fatal occupational injury are homicides. So we can see that females have a much greater risk of being murdered on the job than men do. And of course, there's different causes for that. One is that often we have domestic problems that follow us to work. If you have a man who's been violent in a domestic relationship and the woman's left for her own protection, and he maybe doesn't know where to find her, but he knows where she works, and so he may come find her at work. And so a real big reason, women may be more susceptible to homicides at work are domestic incidents that follow them to work. It could be a function of the type of work being done. Men may be more likely to actually be doing dangerous work. And so, women as a percentage, it may look like a larger percentage of them when they're in those situations. But homicide is the #2 cause of a fatal occupational injury. So that 11% that we see up there, that's the #2 cause of death in the work. But for women, homicide is the #1 cause of death in the workplace. So for all of us, violence in the workplace is a problem, but it's especially concerning, for women in the workplace. And so we need to make sure that we understand how to prevent and protect when we're at work. So what is workplace violence? Workplace violence is any act or threat of physical violence. It can be harassment, intimidation, or other threatening disruptive behavior that occurs at work. And so it doesn't require a battery. It doesn't require someone actually hitting or kicking someone for it to be considered workplace violence. If you have someone who's threatening somebody at work, who's intimidating somebody at work, causing somebody at work to be afraid, that is also violence in the workplace. So we really need to be looking at these behaviors. And some people, may just be thinking, that's just the way they talk. Sometimes you'll see little kids playing and one kid will do something to the other that makes them upset, and that little kid will go, "Hey, I'm going to kill you." And it's just something they say. It's not something they really mean. And we may have that even as adults sometimes, where we say things that we don't really mean, but we need to be really careful because we live in an adult world. And so if you say things that are threatening, or intimidating, or do things or behave in a way that can cause other people to fear, that's things that we need to adjust. We need to not be behaving in a way that can cause other people to be afraid at work. And sometimes we may not even realize that that's going on. So it's important that we talk about it, that we report things that make us uncomfortable so that they can be addressed. So here's some examples of types of things that could be considered violence in the workplace. This is my controversial slide here with examples for violence in the workplace. Not that the political arena is actually the workplace, but it is for some people. But verbal abuse, if you're yelling at somebody, if you're calling them names. That's an example of things that's verbally abusive that can cause people to potentially fear, or to feel that they have reason to fear, that could be a threat. They could be direct threats or indirect threats. I may actually say, I'm going to kill you. That's a direct threat. It could also be something that I just imply. It could be nonverbal threats where I could make, a little sign to somebody, the thumb across the throat or something like that. I don't have to say it for me to communicate to someone a threat. And it could be extreme threats or not necessarily extreme threats, or any actual violent actions where someone does attack somebody, hit somebody, brandish a weapon, where there is that, either actual physical contact, assault, or where there's the possibility of it where someone is made to fear. So what are some of the warning signs that we can be looking out for people who may potentially become violent in the workplace? I'm not sure if you can see this video. It's kind of a low resolution, but it's interesting, what can be concealed and how much can be concealed. One of the first things that we talk about is fascination with weapons. Now, this isn't to say that someone who, has weapons, who uses weapons for sporting or for hobbies or for other things like that, that's necessarily bad. But, sometimes, if someone really has an unusual fascination with weapons, that could be a warning sign. That's not to say this person is going to become violent in the workplace, but that could be just a yellow flag that pops up, or maybe even a red flag, depending on what's going on. Alcohol or drug use, where it can affect people's emotional and psychological stability, are warning signs of someone who's a potential threat in the workplace. Someone who's experiencing severe stress, and it could be anguish over an employment action, or someone who's really unhappy about things that are going on at work, or someone who's just under a lot of pressure at work. When stress builds up, especially if we don't find ways to relieve that stress, someone can come to a breaking point where they may do something, that they wouldn't do if it weren't for the application of that stress in their life. If you've got someone who has a history of violent incidents in their past, that's also someone who potentially could become, more likely to become violent in the workplace. Psychological instability, and so it may take some skill sometimes to determine, what someone's psychological condition may be, but I think we all can recognize when someone is kind of tipping on the edge a little bit there, so if they don't seem to be stable, and that could be a result of stress or other things going on in their lives. It could be stress at work, or it could also be stress from home that contributes to stress that could get them to be in a position where they're, a little unstable. Decreased or inconsistent job performance. You've got someone who's been a good worker, but lately they're just not performing very well, or they're making mistakes or doing things, there's something changing in their life. That's a warning sign that something's wrong with that person. And because people have problems in their life, again, we're not saying that they're going to become violent, but it does increase the risk that that's a potential outcome. Social isolation, people who don't like to be around other people, or they seek opportunities to get away from other people, that's a potential warning sign. Someone lets their personal hygiene go, and again, what we're really looking at here lots of times are changes in behavior. If I've got someone whose personal hygiene has always been bad and, forever, then maybe that's not a sign that someone could become violent. Just the fact that someone, doesn't have great personal hygiene doesn't mean that they could become violent. But someone who all of a sudden just quit caring about their personal hygiene, that could be a warning sign that there's something wrong, that there's something going on in their life. Personality changes, where someone was once really happy and upbeat, and lately they're just really depressed, or they're talking about negative things, or they're complaining a lot, and there's been a change in their personality. Some people, that's all they do. They've just always complained, and there's never been a problem. That's not going to be a higher risk as where we actually see a shift in someone's personality in a negative way. Sometimes it could even be a shift in their personality in a positive way. As someone who's suicidal may actually become more pleasant, more happy once they've made a decision, that they're going to take their life. So that change in personality should always be a flag, a yellow or a red flag that comes up to warn us that there's something going on in this person's life that we maybe need to pay attention to, because sometimes we can help people out, and help them avoid taking that step where they become violent, hurt somebody or hurt themselves as well. An example I use often with this is I had a coworker years ago, and at a previous employment, and he and I were working together one night closing up a facility, and he had this kind of fascination with guns thing going on. He was telling me about his collection, and that was cool. I'm interested in that, and so we're talking about the different weapons that he has in his collection, and he's going on and on and on about them. And then all of a sudden he goes, maybe I thought, sometimes I think it'd just be better if I took that, shotgun and put it to my head, blew my head off. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's not something people say every day, and so we kind of see this fascination with weapons. He did seem a little depressed, and then all of a sudden he suggests this, violent event that he's contemplated. And of course he immediately backpedaled and says, no, I'm just kidding. I didn't really mean that, because he could tell that it kind of shocked me. But I didn't let it go. And so I talked to, my superior about the issue, and we sat down and talked to this employee together, and we were actually able to make some services available to him through an EAP program where he was able to get some counseling. And he was kind of mad at me. He said, I didn't really mean that, and now you're causing me all this trouble. We gave him some leave and told him to take some time off from work, and he wasn't very happy about it. But when he came back to work a few weeks later, he didn't come over to me and say, hey Doug, thanks for ratting me out on all this, but he did come back to me and he says, I feel much better. And he's been fine. He has been much better, and that was years ago. That was probably 15 years ago. And I still see him around to this day, but in reality, he did need help. He was suicidal, and he was able to get the help that he needed. And so it's important to pay attention to these warning signs, because we can get help for people, who need help to avoid, a bad situation in their life. When we talk about violence in the workplace, for our training, we actually use 3 different stages of workplace violence, that we talk about, that helps us identify potential violence and obviously violence when it actually occurs. So stage 1 violence are early indicators. Some of these things we've already talked about: name calling, verbal abuse, harassment, whether it's sexual, racial, or it doesn't even have to be based on a protected class. Just harassment in general of people. Insubordination, argumentative, alienating behaviors, pushing people away, trying to, social isolation. These are all those early stage indicators of someone who's potentially could become violent. And so those are those early warning signs that hopefully we can identify and help this person, talk to this person, and see if there's a way to help them through some issues or problems that they may be having in their life. The next stage 2, is where that starts to escalate a little bit into more serious things. We may not be into actual assault yet, but we may be seeing things that are more serious behaviors. Ignoring policy and procedures, stealing at work. Now, I'd ask you, why is stealing from work an indication of someone who potentially could be violent in the workplace? Well, someone who is stealing from work probably feels that they're owed something. They may feel victimized by their employer, by the workplace in some way, and so they, in their mind, they justify it's okay to take things from work because, gosh darn it, these guys are really putting me through the ringer and they're making my life heck, and man, they really owe me something. And so the idea there, that it's okay to, abuse the employer, take advantage of the employer because, gee, I'm being taken advantage of. That's a warning sign. That's someone not happy in their work that could actually escalate into something worse. making threats that are actual threats of violence against people, whether they're verbal or written, would be a stage 2. Blaming others, and this is something that we see often. Personalities where people can't accept responsibility for their actions are a potential problem. People who will take, when they make a mistake or when something bad happens and always push that blame off to somebody else, that's an indication of someone who is acting in a defensive way. That's a defense that they're doing to try and protect themselves. For some reason, they feel vulnerable and they need, to protect themselves. So they'll pass the buck. They'll blame others and will never accept responsibility. And so that's also a potential warning sign, or someone who is always saying that they're the victim, that everybody's out to get them, that the boss is out to get them. Those, again, would be signs that we need to be looking for that are even a little more serious. And, of course, stage 3 is actual violence, displaying or brandishing a weapon. We don't actually have to, hit somebody, but, if I'm pointing a gun at them or holding a knife to them, that's violence. Battery, where we actually touch the person in an unwanted fashion, slapping, kicking, punching. Of course, that's violent. Any kind of assault, arson, suicide, those are actual violence being realized or potentially being realized. So that would be our stage 3. So really, our role is to anticipate the potential for violence. So recognize stage 1 and stage 2 behaviors, so that we can find ways to intervene, so that we can talk to this employee, find out what's going on in their life, find ways to get them help that they need. And remember, it's not just employees. Violence also can come to the workplace from third parties, from patrons or from family members, like we've mentioned. Sometimes domestic issues can come up. Years ago, when I owned my own business about 20, 25 years ago, I had the wife of one of my employees show up one day in the parking lot of the business with a baseball bat and started beating in the windshield and the headlights on her husband's car. And of course, that wasn't directed at me, it was directed at him. That was violence. It kind of disrupted the business for a while. Obviously, those are things that we want to prevent. I don't want that behavior in the workplace. And hopefully we don't have that behavior at all. So again, recognizing and anticipating potential allows us to help people get help that they need so that we can avoid these situations from coming up. Support your security measures. So, if we've got cameras, if we've got security doors, if we have secured areas with combination locks or other means of keeping us safe in the workplace, let's make sure that we follow the protocol, not just make sure we're caring for and maintaining those systems, but following the protocol to make sure that those can protect us. Make sure that if we see warning signs that we try to intervene, and make sure that we have a plan for how we do this. We want to make sure that we're doing that in a manner that's safe for us as well. Ideally have employee assistance programs, EAP programs available so that we can help people get professional help if needed. If you see something that's concerning to you, make sure you say something about it. Report that to your supervisor. Report that to your administration so that they can put plans in place to address those problems and prevent something from happening so we don't have an explosive violent event actually occur down the road. We mentioned general security. Security doors, often I'll be in your facilities and I'll notice you'll have, a combination lock controlled door, or requires a key code or pass device to get through that door. If you've identified that we need these kind of this hardware in our facility to keep us safe, let's make sure we're not bypassing that. Don't prop doors open so we can come back in and out easily. Don't lend out your passcode to somebody else so that they can come through. Make sure that you keep your combinations, your passcodes, to yourself so that they will do their problem. As soon as I share that with another person, it's out of my control. They can share it with someone else who can share it with someone else. If I give my keys to somebody else, they can make a copy. So make sure that we follow our security protocol. Don't share, your keys, your access codes. Make sure that visitors, have business being there. One of the things that I notice a lot as I come around is we come around doing inspections of your facilities and things, especially years ago when I first started working at the Trust 10, 11 years ago. It surprised me how I could walk into a facility where nobody knew me, but I could wander around and look in cupboards and look in closets and poke around, and I would see employees, across the yard watching me going, and I could tell they were going, I don't know that guy, what's he doing? But no one would approach me. Okay, we want to make sure, if we see something out of place, unusual, that we address it, that we say something, so make sure that visitors are escorted or otherwise, controlled so that they're not getting into things they shouldn't be getting into, so that we as employees don't just ignore someone who's out of place who could be planning a bomb or doing something else that could threaten our security. Lighting is really important. If you've got poor lighting, especially in the wintertime where you may be still at work after dark, things like that, lighting is for a great opportunity for ne'er-do-wells to hide out and wait to do whatever they want to do. So if we've got poor lighting, let's look at improving our lighting. If we've got lighting but it's got some maintenance issues and lights aren't working, let's make sure we fix those things so that our areas are well lit and secure. Some things we can do ahead of time, of course, is to have a plan. We have what we call emergency action plans. An emergency action plan is meant to keep us safe in the workplace from any potential threat, not just violent actions, but it could be to keep us safe in the event of an earthquake or a fire in the building. But we need to make sure that we have an emergency action plan, that we have provided training to our employees ahead of time so they know what our plan is. Do we have an alert signal? Do we have alarms? And what do those alarms mean? Do you have a different alarm for a fire than you do for, say, a violent event going on in the workplace? And do your employees know what those different alarms are, what those different signals are, so that they know what to do if that signal is sent out or if that alarm goes off? Because obviously how I'm going to respond to an active shooter in my workplace is different than how I'm going to respond to a fire. And so have we gone over those plans with our employees so that they know ahead of time what the alarms sound like, what the signal words are, and what to do in those events? Keeping other people away from danger and making sure we get help coming. Obviously, it may seem like obvious things, but they should be part of our plan and things that we train on. So we want to take a little bit of time and talk about, when you do have somebody who is becoming violent, is threatening violence, and they're in the workplace, what are some things that we can do to help prevent that situation from becoming the worst case scenario? How can we keep that violence from actually happening? How do we keep someone from actually attacking somebody, or someone who comes in, with the intent to kill or harm? Are there things that we can do if we're put in that situation where we're, the person in charge? What can we do to help, talk that person down and keep that event from becoming any more violent than it may happen anyway? Number one, when you're dealing with someone who's disgruntled, angry, upset, it's important to remember their perception is reality. In other words, it is their reality. And to them, there's no difference between their reality and just reality. To them, that is what's going on. So you probably heard that saying before, perception is reality. It's really important. If I've got someone who comes in and they're angry because, something didn't go their way, maybe someone comes in here in the trust one day because, they got a claim denied and they're really angry about it, and they, want to come in and cause some harm to us. I cannot go out to that person and start arguing with them about their claim status, why the claim was denied and that they didn't have a claim. That's not going to do me any good, if they're sitting there with a knife or a gun. I need to understand that their perception is their reality, and I need to work with them from that point of view. Arguing with someone and telling them they're wrong never makes them calm down. You think about it. You've been in an argument before, you tell someone that they're wrong, and you yell back at them and tell them they're wrong. That doesn't calm things down. So you need to assume a non-threatening posture, also non-threatening speech. So it's really important to have this non-threatening posture and stay calm. Now, what's a non-threatening posture? Obviously, a non-threatening posture is going to be one where you're open. You know, open your arms, show your hands, you know, so this person doesn't feel like you are a threat. If you cross your arms or put your hands in your pocket, you know, or you lean into somebody, those are all threatening postures. So make sure you maintain, you know, a neutral, open, non-threatening posture. Make sure you don't respond with anger. Someone comes in yelling at you, your natural reflex is going to be to yell back at them, but you got to, you know, control that and make sure that you talk softly in a calm voice. Don't display fear and anxiety. You know, you need to be in control, you need to be calm, you know, but try not to let any fear or anxiety show. And you set the example for how you hope you want this person to behave. Now, granted, I'd like to, you know, just back up a step and say, you know, if we have someone who comes in and they've got a gun and they're threatening violence, obviously, if we can get away and protect ourselves, that's what we want to do. But if I'm in a situation where someone comes in, maybe they're taking hostages, or I'm in a situation where I have to confront or have to deal with this person, these are some rules that I'm going to try and follow to keep this person from going over the edge. When I say I set the example, you know, I'm going to be very calm. I'm going to be non-threatening. I'm going to have this open posture. And I'm going to do these things hoping that this person will follow suit. If I'm not threatening, then they may follow and be not threatening. You know, but I can guarantee you if I do the opposite, you know, then they will react against that as well. And so if the option is there to try and talk this person down out of the tree, I need to do it in a manner that I hope that they can mirror what I'm doing. Take the high road. Make sure you're being truthful with this person. You must have credibility. If this person thinks you're lying to them, you know, then you're not going to be able to get anywhere with them. And if you lie to them and they recognize that lie, then, you know, it's not even a matter of whether they think you're a liar. They know you're a liar. So make sure that you're being truthful with this person so that you can hopefully gain some trust with them. Don't argue with them. Use that soft voice and talk slowly. Make sure you listen to them. It's more important to hear what they have to say than to try and tell them anything. You know, I need to hear what they're having to say so I can figure out what their perspective is, so I can figure out what it is that they want. If it's something that we can help them get or feel like they can get some sort of resolution to, then they will calm down. Sometimes it's just a matter of letting them vent. Someone may come in and they just want to get something off their chest, and they may be yelling and screaming at you, but if you stay calm and listen to them and make sure they know that you're listening, you know, often just being able to say what they wanted to say and get that off their mind, you know, maybe all it takes for them to, you know, decide that they don't need to do anything else. But if I start arguing with them, we're not going to get there. So, you know, make sure that, you know, if they do start yelling or something, don't get alarmed, you know, let them, you know, blow off that steam. If you're in a situation, you know, where this person is there and other people are potentially exposed to a potential danger, you know, and you have to confront this person, try and get them off someplace private. I don't suggest being someplace where you're out of sight of everybody, because you still want, you know, to have your protection and people to be able to summon help for you if necessary, but offer them a place where you can talk with them where they're not feeling like they're exposed to everybody in the room. So offer privacy, but within mind your safety and security. And when you do that, invite the person to sit down, but you sit first. Again, it's set the example of the behavior you want them to follow. You know, if I have someone come into my office and I tell them to, you know, invite them to sit down, but I'm still standing, they're probably not going to sit down. You know, but if I want them to get more of a relaxed position and sit down, then I should sit down and invite them to also sit down. Ask them if you can take notes. You know, they're upset and angry, and if you ask them, hey, this is really important to me, let me take some, is it okay if I take some notes? That's going to send a message to them that you care about what they have to say and that it's important to you to get it right. That's a great message to send, regardless of the notes that you actually take. You know, if it sends that message that you're interested in what they have to say and that you're, you know, cooperating and that they're important to you. Maintain respectful eye contact with the person. If I'm looking away from them, those are things that we might call furtive glances. You know, if I'm talking to this person over here and I keep glancing to the door, that sends a message, whether they actually, you know, interpret it as that, you know, subconsciously, that glancing away to the door or whatever suggests that I want to get out, that I want to escape, that I'm not there for them. And we want them to know that we're there for them. Give them your full attention and keep the person talking. Again, it's more important to hear what they have to say than for you to try and convince them of anything. You know, what's their perception of you? Again, you must be perceived as someone willing to listen, someone who understands, someone who's worthy of respect, you know, that you're non-threatening, you know, and whether this is a third party, a member of the public that comes into your facility, or this is an employee that you're worried about, that you're trying to talk them down out of a tree, perhaps, you know, someone who's exhibiting stage 1 and stage 2 behaviors. These are also good rules to follow, you know, in that interaction with your employees as well. You know, a person in crisis will only respond favorably to someone who they perceive to be listening, understanding, respectful, and not a threat to them. And of course, our goal is to find a solution. We want this person to not become violent. That's the solution that we want. They obviously may have other things that they feel they need, you know, solutions that they're looking for. So encourage that person to suggest possible solutions. If that person suggests the solution, it's their own solution, they're much more likely to go along with that to a resolution. Or if you at least can help them feel like they participated in and influenced the identification of a solution, they're more likely to go along with it than if you just suggest a solution and they feel like you're imposing a solution on them. So try to involve them in finding a solution to their problem. You know, we can help right wrongs. Sometimes they may have been wronged. Sometimes it may just be a perception that they have and it's not actual. But either way, we want to help them feel like there's a way we're going to right whatever wrong it is that they're upset about. And if you tell them you're going to do something, if you tell them you're going to call the mayor, you're going to call the boss, you know, and you're going to address this thing, you know, pick up the phone and make the call. Let them see that you're doing what you're promising them that you're going to do. Again, it comes back to that trust. So again, remember, people are more likely to agree when they have helped formulate the answer or the solution. It may surprise you how reasonable their suggestions might be. Chances are they just want to be heard. This person must believe you're going to act on any injustices that are actually identified that they've suffered, and make sure you do what you've promised to do to help that person out. Now, sometimes you may be dealing with someone who's just not there. You know, there can be mental illness. There can be other reduced capacities for reasons such as intoxication. You know, and this person may not be rational. And in that situation, you know, we may have to find another way out. You know, if the person can't be reasoned with, you know, that's something we need to be looking for those signs so that we can encourage others to evacuate, get help coming, or whatever may be the case. If an individual is mentally ill or under the influence of drugs or alcohol, you know, their capacity to perceive, to understand, to comprehend your efforts on their behalf may be blocked by their incapacity, you know, and so make sure that you are looking to keep yourself safe and others safe and identify situations where you may not be able to negotiate with or help somebody out because of some sort of intoxication or incapacity. Remember, you're looking for a win-win resolution. People, you know, they need to know that, you know, they're getting something, you know, if you're trying to negotiate a resolution. And so you also want to help them save face. You know, dignity is important. If this person just, you know, said that they're going to, you know, do something violent to everybody in front of a whole bunch of people, well, now there's all those witnesses that they may feel they have to go through with what they said because, gee, all these people heard them say that. And so again, you know, trying to isolate that person if possible so that, you know, they can save face, so they don't feel like, you know, they have to go through with their plan or go through with their threats because everybody heard them. So, you know, trying to preserve their dignity. Quid pro quo, if you do something for me, I'll do something for you. And so when that person asks for something and you agree to do it for them, try to get that little writer tagged in there as well. Okay, I'm going to do this for you, or I did this thing for you. I need you to do something for me. And that way we can help work towards a resolution so that it's not just what they're demanding, but we can help resolve the situation, you know, through identifying quid pro quo and win-win scenarios. But make sure it's fair. You know, they'll recognize if you're trying to, you know, just put an end to the situation or take advantage of them. They need to feel like, you know, they're getting a fair deal out of the situation as we identify a solution to the problem. So those are just some ideas on how to deal with someone who's upset, you know, that we can, you know, try and talk them down out of a tree. Sometimes threats come in, though, that aren't that way. You know, it's not just someone who's angry who potentially, you know, is going to do something violent. Sometimes we have to deal with situations where someone comes in, not just intent to do violent, but actually just being violent right off the bat. You know, in today's world, we recognize that we're not just dealing with situations where someone's angry about something and they want, you know, some sort of consideration or benefit, you know, that they've been victimized and they want that resolved somehow. Sometimes we just are dealing with people like we've seen in the news lately who are just out to harm and kill. And so if that's the situation, we recognize that's the situation, then we have a totally different plan that we need to make sure we're following. So if we are actually facing a threat, again, make sure we've planned ahead. Make sure we have that emergency action plan. Make sure you know your building environment. If I need to evacuate a building to avoid a violent threat, I need to know all the ways out of the building, and I need to know the ways out of the building away from the threat so I don't have to go towards the threat to be able to evacuate the building. So again, helping make sure that we have a plan ahead of time, that we have maps. These maps, you know, should be posted in our building, you know, just for fire safety purposes and make sure people know where exits are. But, you know, plan ahead, do a drill. You know, whether it's a drill responding to a violent situation or a drill responding to a fire, you know, make sure that our employees know how to evacuate the building and practice that. You know, so, you know, make sure you train on that plan. Make sure you help employees understand how to remain calm and the importance of helping others as much as possible. You know, one of the trainings that we use when we're talking about actual active shooters or people coming into a workplace to actually cause harm and kill is the run, hide, fight plan. And so when we talk about that first part, you know, if you've got someone, you hear gunshots, someone's coming in, they're actually, you know, causing harm and being violent, we want to make sure we evacuate the building if possible, get people out if possible. If we can get away from that threat, that's our first choice. You know, that's the best way to keep ourselves and others alive, is to get away. And so run, leave your belongings behind, don't stop, don't waste time collecting things that you're worried about leaving on your desk. Make sure you just get your person up and encourage as many people around you as possible to join you and exit that building away from the threat as soon as possible. Prevent others from entering the building. So once you get out, make sure if you see anyone else who's approaching the area, try and warm them away so that they don't come into that building where that violent act is going on. And when you're safe, call 911 and make sure that first responders are aware and available to come as soon as possible. If you cannot evacuate the building, then we look for a way to hide from the threat. Lock doors. If you can go into an office, a closet, or something where you can close the door and lock the door, you know, make sure that you can try and keep that door so it can't be open. So lock it, blockade the door, move furniture in front of it. Make sure that you're not visible. You know, if there's windows into that room, you know, draw the curtains or close the shades. Make sure you're occupying a part of the room maybe where you can't be seen from outside. Turn the lights off. Silence your cell phone, and don't just silence the ringer, but make sure you silence the vibration mode as well, because that is very audible, you know, especially in a situation where it's very quiet. You need to make sure you remain very quiet and stay out of the view of the attacker. And if you can, try not to trap yourself. If you can hide someplace where you can still escape from if the opportunity presents itself, you know, look for places that you can hide in and also escape from if possible. Again, this is important to plan ahead. So whether we're doing a whole plan as an entity, as an organization, or whether it's just me looking at my workplace and where can I hide and how can I protect myself here, we should all take a little bit of time to decide, what would I do in this scenario? How would I exit my office? Where could I hide that I could easily escape from as well? And look for those hiding places ahead of time and identify ways that you can secure yourself in those hiding places if possible. It's not something you want to try and figure out on the fly when the event happens. Look around your workspaces today and determine what your hiding places are and what your strategies are for protecting yourself in that hiding place. The third option, though, is if you are you know, in that situation where you're threatened by an attacker and you can't escape and you can't hide, or if that person has found you, then you must fight. Your option of survival is to fight. If I do nothing and this person is just intent on killing as many people as possible, and I do nothing, he will kill you. And so make sure that you, whether you're acting by yourself or with others, and that's obviously preferable. If there's 3 or 4 or 6 of you and you can rush them all together, that's going to give you much better chances of survival than acting alone, but attack that person. Many of these attackers will go on the attack until they run into significant resistance. Their goal is to kill as many as possible as quickly as possible. And if they see that, you know, you are or your group is putting up a lot of resistance, they may move on or just end the situation right there. And a lot of these situations do end with the attacker taking their own life once they have run into sufficient resistance and they see that the game's over. One way or another, that puts an end to the situation. So incapacitate the shooter. You throw things at them. If you've got staplers, if you've got, you know, anything that you can throw at them, you know, pick up furniture, you know, hold chairs or other things in front of you as you rush the person to give you some protection. Improvise weapons. A fire extinguisher, you know, if it's small enough to handle, is a great weapon. Look for the things that you have around, you know, that may be that improvised weapon in an emergency. And when you decide to attack, make sure you're committed to that action, you know, that you're not going to back down. You know, it's going to be for your safety and for the safety of everybody else around you. Your safety is primary, though. Remember, when first responders show up in this kind of a situation, you know, their job is to put a stop to the threat. You know, so there may be people wounded, and their first job is going to be to stop the threat, not to stop and help the wounded. And so remember that. If you need help, if you've been injured, you know, when the police first show up, when you first see them coming into the building, you know, they have their first responsibility is to stop the threat. So when they show up, you need to remain calm. Now remember, the first responders, when the police show, they may not know who the threat is. The threat may look like somebody who belongs, who's there. And I remember I saw a video at the Umpqua Community College shooting in Oregon a year or so ago, how they had all the students from campus leaving campus with their hands up, and they all got frisked and everything, because you don't know who the threat is. And so remember, in this situation, you know, the police aren't just going to assume that you are a victim. You know, they're going to be looking for the threat. You need to stay calm. You need to follow instructions. If you're told, you know, to put your hands up or to get on the ground or whatever you're told to do, make sure you follow those instructions. Make sure your hands stay visible. You know, these same rules of not being a threat, you want to make sure the police know that you're not a threat. You know, avoid yelling and screaming. You know, help will come, and help is coming for the wounded, but we need to make sure, you know, that we're very compliant with those first responders when they arrive.
Hey, Doug.
Yeah.
Hey, we had a question come in that says if you were talking about situational awareness, it has to do with being aware of people coming into your workspace and potential violence. Do you want to address that?
Well, you know, it kind of comes back to, you know, what's out of place. You know, if you've got something going on in your workplace that doesn't look right, you know, you see that person wandering around the office that doesn't belong, you know, someone who maybe looks suspicious, you know, because of the way they're dressed, you know, maybe it's obvious they're trying to hide their face or hide their appearance, or they're carrying, you know, some, you know, packs or bags or things that look unusual, you know, anything like that that's out of the ordinary, or things that should cause you, you know, to be concerned and to start thinking about what is your course of action that you should be following. But situational awareness really comes down to, you know, identifying anything that is out of the normal, whether that's about a person's behavior, you know, the way they're acting, the things they're saying, the way they're dressed, what they're carrying with them, you know, if they're in a place where they belong. I mean, we need to really be aware of and be prepared to act with regard to anything that is out of ordinary or out of the norm. You know, when the threat is past, people will need help. And so we need to make sure we're prepared to provide help, provide first aid if you've been trained in first aid. You know, make sure that you're, you know, helping people who may need assistance, get medical assistance coming. Recognize the signs of shock. Someone who hasn't even been injured, they haven't even suffered a physical trauma, can go into shock, which can still be a life-threatening situation. So, you know, recognize someone who may be in shock and help them. They could be really behaving irrational, they could be really agitated, or they could just be really calm and zoned out, you know, but look for those signs of shock and get that person help as well, even if they're not bleeding. Fear, stress, and emotions are natural after an incident like this. Sometimes people will get survivor's guilt. It's important that if you ever are involved in a situation like this, you don't blame yourself for what did or didn't happen, and be open to the option of getting counseling. So often we say, oh no, I'm fine, I don't need any help. But in reality, you know, you can have post-traumatic stress from situations like this, and it's important to make sure that we seek counseling if you know, if that's even remotely a possibility. Another potential violent activity in the workplace we need to be aware of is a potential bomb threat, for example. A bomb threat may come on the telephone, and so things to remember, you know, if you do take a call where a threat is being phoned in, whether it's a bomb or some other kind of threat, you know, stay calm and keep that person talking as much as possible. You want to collect information, not just about what they're saying, but any other sounds that you hear on the phone that could help identify this person or their location or, you know, the veracity of their threat. Listen politely, show interest, you know, be alert, and make sure that you collect as much information as possible. You know, if the caller ID is showing a number, make sure you make a note of that number. Don't hang up the phone. Even if they've hung up, leave the phone off the hook. And then contact emergency services, complete the bomb threat checklist, and we'll show you what that looks like in a minute, and make sure that you activate whatever your protocol is that's been identified in your emergency action plan. So the checklist may include things that you want to make sure and see if you can find out about. When you've got that person on the phone making that threat, you know, ask them, where is the bomb or the chemical or whatever, you know, that is that they're threatening with? When will it go off? Now, common sense may tell you they're not going to tell you that, but hey, you know, how do you know if you don't ask? And their response, even if it may not be the response you're looking for, the response may be helpful still in identifying this person the nature of the threat, the veracity of the threat. So where's the bomb? When will it go off? What does it look like? What kind of bomb is it? What is the explosive agent? What will set it off? You know, is it on a timer? Is it, you know, on a remote control that they have? Did you place the bomb? You know, would be a question to ask. Why? What is your name? Again, really things that common sense will tell you that this person isn't going to give you this information, but they very well might give you information. And so ask for that information. Be listening for background noises, traffic, machinery, animals, street noises, anything that may, you know, help identify where this call is coming from. What does the caller's voice sound like? Are they angry? Are they calm? Are they male, female? Do they sound young or old? Or do they have an accent? You know, what kind of words do they use? Is it really vulgar, or do they have specific, you know, are there interesting or different types of linguistic, you know, compositions that they're using, you know, that may be identifiable? You know, are they incoherent, or do they sound like they're reading from a script? Does it sound like it's just a recording? You know, are they rational or irrational? You know, what's going on? These are all things that, you know, would be important to make notes of to help us, you know, determine what the threat actually is, whether it's real, and what we can do about it. If you find a suspicious package, there are things that should, you know, clue you into this package being something that you don't want to touch, and you should treat as, you know, a suspicious package, a potential bomb or other agent. That's a threat. Number one, no return address. If there's no return address on the box, that's a red flag. If there's excessive postage on the box, that's a red flag as well. Stains from things leaking through the box from the inside or something could also be a red flag. Strange odors emanating from the package, sounds obviously emanating from the package, ticking, for example, maybe. That might be kind of old school. Poor handwriting is another red flag on a package that might indicate if you just find a box laying on the ground and it's got some really bad handwriting on it, misspelling. You know, poor English is, you know, a red flag as well. So incorrect titles, you know that it's addressed to a specific person, but it's not using a proper title. Or a wrong title. Unexpected delivery, you know, a package you're not expecting shows up, like that's kind of a red flag as well. So, and of course, you know, you call authorities. There are actually printed out bomb threat checklists that you can go through that kind of walk you through all these steps, you know, and we'll have instruction for employees, you know, what kind of information that they need to make sure and take down and pass on to authorities. Another important thing to do in that threat situation, if you're taking a threat over the phone, you know, alert your coworkers, you know, write a note, show people the note or whatever so that your coworkers, you know that there's a threat and know how to react, and that we've trained people to stay calm and follow a set procedure for evacuation and alerting authorities. If I'm on the phone with someone calling in a threat and I'm trying to keep them on the phone and get as much information as possible, I'm not really calling 911 too. You know, so that alerting a coworker, you know, and that person knows to then call for security or call, you know, for first responders to come. That's something that they can get going while you're still trying to collect as much information as possible from that threat. The time's gone. I've actually exceeded my time a little bit here. I really appreciate everybody joining in today. I know that there's a lot more we could talk about on this subject, but I hope we covered some things that are helpful, maybe a few things you hadn't thought of before that can help you have a better plan in the case of a violent occurrence in your workplace. Remember, workplace violence isn't just somebody actually, you know, having a violent act. It can be threats, it can be intimidation. We need to train our employees not to be, you know, threatening each other and intimidating each other and acting in antisocial ways in the workplace. We need to recognize warning signs, you know, the stage 1, stage 2 behaviors, you know, that someone may exhibit before they actually turn into a violent threat. Engage individuals exhibiting concerning behavior. Make sure that we do it in an unthreatening way and make sure that we're communicating to them our concern, our desire to help them resolve their problems and get help that they need. Report warning signs if you see something that's not right, something that's out of place, someone who's out of place, or behaviors that are concerning. You know, stage 1 or stage 2 behaviors or others. Make sure that we tell our supervisors and administration about those things so that we can act on them. Help diffuse a situation. If you're in a situation where you have to talk and engage this person who's angry or upset, you know, find those non-threatening ways, be very concerned, very interested in them, give them your full attention, and help them feel like you can help them find a solution to their problem. In the event of an actual ongoing threat where someone's not negotiating with you, run, hide, and fight, and make a plan ahead of time. Be familiar with your building, know how you're going to use it, you know, to protect yourself in that situation. And most importantly, make sure you stay calm, gather as much, you know, information as possible as you're going, but make sure you take care of yourself and protect yourself first. That's always the most important thing. Beware of you know, packages that may also seem out of place as well, along with those same rules. So any other questions or comments come up? I'm sure there's folks out there that have great things that they could contribute to this. I don't know if anybody has said anything.
I don't see any other comments other than they're saying very good session, and you did a good job, Doug.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Here's all of our contact information, so feel free to contact us at any time. Any one of us can be reached at 801-936-6400, but then there's our individual cell phones and emails are listed here as well. So we're here for you. We're to aid and assist you and do everything we can to help keep you and your employees and everybody you work with safe in their work environment. So take advantage of us, and thanks for being here this morning. That's it.